Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Fan, Vice Provost for International Studies and Global Engagement at UCLA. As a land-grant institution, the International Institute at UCLA acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva peoples as traditional land caretakers of Tavanga. And in celebration of International Education Week, or IEW, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the 8th annual UCLA Glocal conversation. But wait, if you attended the event last year, you might remember that we called it the UCLA Global Conversation last year. So what happened? Well, we've actually changed the name to Glocal Conversation this year. But why? Well, our Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost, Darnell will help answer that question in a few minutes. So you have homework, Darnell. Okay. But I will simply say that UCLA's mission is the creation, dissemination, preservation, and application of knowledge for the betterment of the global society. And this global society includes our local community. IEW is a joint initiative of the U.S. Department of State and Department of Education, celebrated each fall at college campuses throughout the United States to promote programs that prepare Americans for a global environment and attract future leaders from abroad to study, learn, and exchange experiences. This initiative highlights the immense value of international education for U.S. students, whether acquired through study abroad, coursework, or research involving intercultural perspectives, language studies, or internships, as well as the deep contributions made by students and scholars from other countries. This year's International Education Week at UCLA is supported by 22 campus sponsors and has 63 events organized by 36 campus units, from musical and cultural performances to martial arts workshops to lectures on global politics to international career events. There is something for everyone this week. Many of the campus sponsors and leaders representing these units are in the audience right now. I'd like to thank you for all your generosity and hard work and for being here this afternoon. I also like to thank Chancellor Bloch for attending today's event. He has been a strong supporter of IEW and has spoken many times at past events. So thank you very much, Jean. But you don't have to speak today, so no pressure. At UCLA, the International Institute leads the campus celebration. I'd like to sincerely thank the faculty and students of the Institute for their enthusiastic participation, and especially our amazing staff for making IEW and this afternoon's event possible. Arturo, Chloe, Christine, Catherine, Kaya, Kevin, Marisa, Oliver, Peggy, and Warren. My deep gratitude to you, my friends. We have a special event today, beginning with EVCP Hunt's remarks, followed by discussion and Q&A with 4 distinguished panelists, 4 distinguished members of UCLA. First of all, please join me in welcoming EVCP Darnell Hunt.
Thank you so much, Cindy. All right, so I very much appreciate the opportunity to join you here today, and I'm going to do my best to explain the origin of Glocal, okay? So it's my great pleasure to welcome our audience to this Glocal conversation, where you will hear from an esteemed panel of UCLA scholars and experts who are doing impactful work that reaches around the world. But I don't think we can discuss our international connections without first acknowledging the difficult moment that we're all in, and recognizing that many on our campus and in our region are impacted by the conflict taking place in the Middle East. As an institution, of course, and as a community, we mourn the innocent lives lost and wish to express a sincere hope for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Now, UCLA is a state university in California, but its orientation is truly global. Our scholarship focused not only on the betterment of Los Angeles or of California, but on the betterment of the world. As you will hear this afternoon, we have scholars across the globe developing solutions abroad that we can then apply here in our own region. Conversely, we also have experts solving problems here in Southern California whose solutions can then be shared internationally. The world's most pressing problems like climate change, global conflict, and infectious disease are not confined by national borders. To solve these problems, we must strengthen our international collaborations, advance research and creative activities, bringing together partners around the world, bolster international alumni networks, and ensure our students develop intercultural competence so they can thrive in a global economy. Since so many global issues are present here in Los Angeles, we can use our Glocal model to facilitate much of our impact. I look forward to hearing from our panelists about what they have already achieved through Glocal collaborations and hope that their work will serve as an inspiration for many others. And so thank you all for taking interest in the role that UCLA plays in global applied scholarship. Enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, Darnell. I would also want to add that one of the reasons why we're talking about Glocal is that we are living in this international city of Los Angeles, right? So if I remember correctly, close to 40% of the population in LA County were born outside of the United States. And in LA City, 58% of the population in LA City speaks a language other than English at home, okay? And of course, we are also home of many of the biggest diasporas and heritage communities in the entire country. So we are really a special city when we talk about Glocal. So thank you, Darnell, for those remarks. And last year, we had a panel called Global Challenges, Local Responses. And this year, building upon last year's theme and in alignment with the new UCLA Strategic Plan, our program focused on the Glocal impact. And it is my honor to introduce our 4 panelists. So Eric Israelian, Sylvia Forney, Andrea Gatz, and Ruben Hernandez-Leon, please take a seat on stage. As they are coming up stage, I will simply highlight some important and interesting features of their bios. Their full bios are available through the invitations you received. So Dr. Eric Israelian, Chief of the Mnookin Division of Digestive Diseases in the David Gavin School of Medicine at UCLA. He is a physician, Emmy-nominated film producer, and entrepreneur. He is also actively involved in philanthropic efforts connecting health, human rights, education, and the arts. And he is co-chair of the UCLA Second Century Council. The films that he produced and the accompanying social impact campaigns have led to the creation of the Promise Institute of Human Rights and the Promise Armenian Institute at UCLA. And in 2021, he was honored by Pope Francis with the Benemerenti Medal for his humanitarian activities around the world. Dr. Sylvia Forney joined the Fowler Museum as Shirley and Ralph Shapiro Director in December 2022. Before moving to LA, she served as Senior Curator of Global Africa and Deputy Vice President of the Department of Art and Culture at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto and was affiliated with the Department of Anthropology at the University of Toronto. Among her recent publications is the volume Making History, Visual Art, and Blackness in Canada, and award-winning books, Art, Honor, and Ridicule, Fenty Afaso, Flags from Southern Ghana, and Africa in the Market, 20th Century Art from the Amret African Art Collection. Andrea Gatz, Distinguished Professor of Physics and Astronomy at UCLA, and the Lauren Lightman and Arthur Levine Chair in Astrophysics, is one of the world's leading experts in observational astrophysics and is director of UCLA's Galactic Center Group. In 2020, she became the 4th woman in the world to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for her independent discovery of a supermassive compact object, now generally recognized to be a black hole in the Milky Way's galactic center. She serves on several leadership committees for the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, which hosts the largest telescopes in the world. Professor Gatz is also very committed to the communication of science to the general public and inspiring young girls to enter the field of science. Last but not least, Ruben Hernandez-Leon is Professor of Sociology, Director of the Latin American Institute, and co-chair of the MA Interdepartmental Program in Latin American Studies at UCLA. He previously directed the UCLA Center for Mexican Studies. Among his award-winning books are Metropolitan Migrants, The Migration of Urban Mexicans to the United States, and Skills of the Unskilled, Work and Mobility Among Mexican Migrants. He's currently working on a book based on a 25-year study of a new destination of Mexican immigration in the US South, and a study of the migration industry operating the H-2 temporary worker visa program. As you can see, we really have a distinguished panel here. And let's get started. So one objective of the UCLA Strategic Plan, new strategic plan, is to deepen UCLA's impact. So I have a question for each one of you, and that is, can you share with us an impactful program or project that you've led or have been involved in? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, how do you think that this program or project connect global communities to local communities in Los Angeles and California? So let's start with you, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you to all of you. And it's an honor to be here with such a distinguished panel and friends and colleagues. So as Dr. Fan mentioned, one of the things I've had an honor to be involved with is trying to establish new programs or projects and institutes at UCLA. And Cindy mentioned 2 of them that I'm very proud of. So we created the Promise Institute for Human Rights in 2017 in the UCLA School of Law, and then the Promise Armenian Institute in 2019, which is actually in the International Institute. So very timely. And both projects really came to be because of the expertise of the UCLA faculty, the students, the programs already in place, the School of Law, the International Institute. And even though we had expertise at UCLA, this structure didn't exist. So it really took leadership, Chancellor Block, Cindy Fan at the time, Dean Mnookin at the School of Law, to come up with great ideas, to partner with faculty, to build on the excellence of the faculty that were already here. And Cindy, as you mentioned, we are in Los Angeles. So one thing about UCLA that I think really distinguishes the university from many other great universities is just the benefits we have from being in Los Angeles, having this diverse community, having so many students, faculty, alumni that come from so many different backgrounds, and then building on excellence and then kind of projecting that out to the world. So I can give one example in terms of something specific. In this past year, the UCLA School of Law and the Promise Institute for Human Rights hosted the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights at UCLA, a really impressive group of distinguished judges and officials came to UCLA. They stayed at the Luskin. They met with many faculty in the School of Law, as well as colleagues in the field of human rights. And that all happened at UCLA through the Provost Institute for Human Rights. And we just announced that we opened an office actually in the Netherlands at The Hague. So the Provost Europe will be that entity. And all of this really started because of a committed group of faculty, and it was an honor to put the resources together to make that happen. But I think it's just an example of UCLA having the Cal parts because we're here and local, but we're really global because of the global impact.
Thank you, Eric. And I was wondering if you can expand a little bit also on how the local communities in Los Angeles support these activities.
Well, I think there's two ways that can happen. I think there's first engagement, so depending on people's interests. So for the Human Rights Institute, it's people who are interested in human rights advocacy, scholarship, and there are already some organizations that exist locally, but alumni from the School of Law and people who want to pursue human rights law. For the Armenian Institute, the fact that this is one of the largest diasporan populations of Armenians in the world outside of Armenia, and definitely the largest in the United States. So the Provost Armenian Institute, under the direction of the inaugural faculty director, Dr. Ann Karagosian, has really launched an impressive amount of programming, grant projects, and collaborative projects with people in the community. And the event programming is actually very impressive, and I think that has created a forum for people in the community to participate and interact with UCLA. Many students, so student organizations, alumni organizations, and then just people who have really no connection to UCLA, but they're Angelenos, and they would like to connect with some sort of academic institution that has scholarship and I think and really unique kind of ways to connect with the community at a high level. And so all of that is because of the Armenian Institute. I mean, UCLA has a tremendous history of scholarship for 50 years of Armenian studies, but this structure didn't quite exist. So because of many people here and many people in the community, it really came together, and it's quite impressive.
Great, thank you, Eric. And Sylvia, you're rather new to UCLA, and so you'll be forgiven if you don't know too much about Los Angeles yet, but of course you spend quite a lot of time in Toronto, so.
Yeah, but I think even in the brief time that I've been in LA, you know, there are many similarities between LA and Toronto and being international cities. I think Toronto is probably the most multicultural, but LA is very similar in many ways. And we are the largest collection of world arts on the West Coast, and probably one of the largest in the US. So we're the small museum in UCLA, but we have over 130,000 objects from all over the world. So this idea of Glocal is really very much baked into everything we do. And just as an example, the last two exhibitions that we had at the Fowler, one actually was two exhibitions that featured different arts that connects the Armenian community to LA in different ways. So an exhibition of Armenian lace, an art form that is transmitted and it's very much part of the cultural understanding, but also of the daily life of people. And needle lace is something people bring with them and cherish. And it becomes how you identify an Armenian home wherever you are in the world. But it's also very specific, culturally significant art. And then an exhibition of photography of Armenian LA-based photographers that really connected the idea of homeland with the idea of the diaspora and the multiple homelands that we inhabit as immigrants. And this was a chance to really bring in so many people from the community. And art has this power of connecting communities, even if they're not necessarily art historians or experts. We can activate art in various ways that are very accessible. And then the last exhibition that we opened last week was an extraordinary global local exercise. This is an exhibition on Yoruba art, religious art, across the ocean and into the Americas. So this Nigerian-born religion has traveled with people, and despite hardship, thrived in the New World, in Cuba, in Brazil, and all the way in the US. And so our exhibition starts and includes objects from Nigeria, from Brazil, and Cuba, and installation and work of contemporary LA-based artists that practice or express in their art this religious form. And at the opening, there were 1,500 people, Afro-Cubans, Nigerians, Black, American, associated, though, with this powerful idea of Ifa and this religion that really crosses across cultures and brings everybody together in a space of dialogue, not identity, not, it's their differences, but there is a shared understanding and the possibility also of celebrating together. So I feel that what we do at the Fowler and why the Fowler is an important Glocal hub is also because it can be a space of celebration. It can be a space of joyful understanding, which is something that is harder and harder to have today. So it should be something that we really cherish when we can achieve it.
Thank you. This is really a beautiful example. And the exhibition is still on?
Yeah, well, it opened last week. So it's open for 6 months, and I hope you all make it. It's really gorgeous.
Thank you for that. And when you brought up art being celebration and it's a creative activity, that reminded me of our Vice Chancellor for Research, Roger Wakimoto, when he, sorry to put you on the spot, Roger, but when he first started his role as Vice Chancellor for Research, he actually changed the name of his office, the name of his title, from Vice Chancellor for Research to Vice Chancellor for Research and Creative Activities. And I think that's a very important statement that he has made. And when we talk about research, it's much more than STEM. It includes STEM, of course, but social sciences, humanities, and arts.
Absolutely, yeah.
Andrea, for you, global means much more than just the Earth. So how do you connect the global with local with your work?
Yes, I was going to start there in the sense that my work is in the Division of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and of course we study the universe. And the scale is so large that of course our planet, the global, seems very local. But of course it's the tools and the people that raise the global issues. And what's wonderful about this field is that it's a field of study that can transcend the local issues or the global issues to bring people together. So let me start with the telescopes, because in fact, the University of California owns the largest telescope in the world. And in fact, this has attracted roughly 25% of the research active faculty in the United States to the University of California system. So UC is an incredibly powerful, world-leading location for astronomy, thanks to the telescopes. And our position in having the largest telescope in the world has been that for 100 years. So there's been a progression through 3 major telescopes, the first of which was UC only, but system-wide. The next one brought us to California-wide, plus NASA, so it was a UC-Caltech collaboration. And today we're working on a telescope that is really global. It's UC, Caltech, Canada, Japan, China, and India. So that's a really interesting global facility. Before I go into the global aspects of the big telescope, let me situate UCLA, because in fact, Santa Cruz is the headquarters for this system-wide investment. And as these telescopes go on, one of the ways in which you keep them at the forefront is to really pay attention to what's happening in terms of instrumentation that you can put on the back end. So Santa Cruz is very good at optical astronomy, so what your eye detects. And what UCLA recognized when Keck Observatory came online, which was 30 years ago, is that there was this new technology that was likely to take over the forefront of telescope technology, which is in the infrared. And if you've been paying attention to the James Webb Space Telescope, that is an infrared telescope. But 30 years ago, infrared detectors was just an emerging technology. And UCLA recognized that the aerospace industry here really drives a lot of the development of infrared detectors. So committed to hiring a lot of faculty in this arena of infrared astronomy and astrophysics. And by doing so, really put UCLA on the map. Okay, so that's why this program that I run was able to get off the ground. It's UCLA's investment in these new technologies, and I was interested with my group of developing new ways of using these telescopes. And of course, when you develop new tools, that spreads throughout both the local and the global. This is a program, I think as Cindy already mentioned, it's all about the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. But what people don't probably or recognize or know is that this is a program that was rejected when we were first proposed it, both from a telescope resource and a financial resource. And what I truly appreciate is UCLA's belief in this project, the risk that they took actually in hiring me right at the get-go. I was really young. But also just having the determination to make this project work. And of course, that has enabled this project to go from a very small 3-year vision to a 30-year Nobel Prize winning endeavor. And the thing I want to add about this is that this recognition for the group this prize makes me the 4th woman ever to win the Nobel Prize in Physics, raising the percentage to 2%. And I think this is one of the ways in which UCLA really shines in terms of both the local and the global, is investing in a diverse set of leaders. And of course, that's important both locally to our students, as well as globally to create that next generation of diverse leaders.
Great. I hope that that percentage will increase very quickly. There's a lot of room to grow. I know that, of course, I think you discovered, your discovery was done independently, but I'm sure that you work with collaborators all over the world.
Yeah, so as this collaboration has grown from a group of 3 to a core group of 25 and a collaboration network of 100, it is definitely a collaboration that's worldwide. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess that's a very important point, given the fact that international collaboration in research right now seems to be quite challenging, given all the difficulties we have, in the world. So hopefully science will continue to march forward despite these challenges. Mm-hmm. Okay. Ruben, I see Ruben actually quite a bit because he's part of the International Institute. Of course, your work is very much on our neighbor, but also you're director of Latin American Institute. You're talking about a big part of the world, and so you must have tons of examples about Glocal.
Yes, thank you, Cindy. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on this panel with such distinguished colleagues. I'm going to come back to Earth in a way, because first of all, I wanted to share with you that the Latin American Institute will be celebrating its 65th anniversary next year. So the LAI, as we call it, has been around for a good number of decades at this point, and the Latin American Institute is truly a global hub for developing knowledge on Latin America and the Caribbean. We have multiple centers, programs, working groups that very much cover the entire subcontinent, the entire Latin America. And I told you this I shared this with you a few moments ago, but I wanted to share this with the audience. Out of the 63 events that UCLA is putting together for International Education Week, the LAI is offering 7. Just from Monday through Thursday, we have events on Cuba, on Mexico, on Chile, on European research on Latin America, and much more. I cannot even attend all these events. There are so many just happening in 4 days. But today I actually wanted to share with you a program or a component of the LAI's activities, which I'm actually very proud of, and that truly connect the global and certainly Latin America as a global region with our neighborhoods, our schools, and our communities, and that is our outreach program. So the LAI offers lectures, presentations, workshops, conferences as opportunities for professional development for K-12 teachers in Los Angeles. We work closely with LAUSD, but we're over the past 2 years under my directorship, we have actually increased our sort of scope, and now we're offering many of these things to teachers throughout Southern California, in fact, throughout the state and beyond. And what we do is we bring experts, scholars, state-of-the-art knowledge on Latin America to teachers who take these presentations, who participate in these workshops, in-person workshops, and then they develop lessons for the children in public schools in Los Angeles. So the effect that we are having through these connections with the teachers impacts not just a few dozen or a few hundred, but most likely thousands of children in our schools and in our public schools. And one of the things that also happened is that these teachers not only develop lessons on Latin America and the Caribbean for these students, for these kids, but also these students then develop initiatives of their own, clubs, projects, travel ideas that they want to do. So this is, I think, I call it sort of the gem of the LAI, because it really connects our institution to the neighborhoods, to the communities, to the schools, and to the teachers who are such important agents of change, of learning, and dissemination in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this project. And indeed, UCLA is a change agent. And so what we do, it's not only in Westwood, and of course we've bought the downtown campus, a downtown building, and also in South Bay, but also we are a change agent that also helps our community in Los Angeles. And I think your example is right on. And I think over this past summer, LAI had a Center for Mexican Studies in particular, brought K-12 teachers to Oaxaca. And they came back, and the idea is that they can, infuse the information and expertise into the curriculum. And I also learned that Los Angeles has the largest number of Oaxacanos outside Oaxaca. So we're not just talking about country; we're talking about region of a country that we have the largest diaspora from certain regions of the world. So I wanted to open this up to all the panelists, and I think, Ruben, you've already talked about a little bit about what your center and what your project does, that, what it means to residents of Los Angeles. I wonder if other panelists can also talk about, if I were a resident of Los Angeles, if I were, living in Los Angeles, if I don't have much to do with UCLA, let's say, I didn't go to UCLA, I don't have a child that goes to UCLA, why would they care about what you do? What does it mean to them?
I mean, I can just start, just to kick it off. I think looking, I kind of mentioned the Armenian Institute and the interconnectedness that it has facilitated, but in the Human Rights Institute, we have a new executive director, Hannah Gary, who's amazing, and she came from USC, so we were able to, I think friendly rivalry, but steal some talent locally. And then Kate McIntosh, who was our first executive director, she's going to be leading Promise Europe. But I think for people living in Los Angeles, the Human Rights Institute is a pathway for them to connect with human rights issues around the world. And as Darnell mentioned, the world affairs are dominating not just the headlines, but the lives of many people living in Los Angeles right now. And one of the reasons we created this institute was, the name connects to the Armenian genocide, but really it's about human rights issues around the world. And if you look at the expertise of the faculty and the work they're doing, it covers everything from women's rights to ecocide and issues related to climate and the environment. And I think people living in Los Angeles, they have a lot of opportunities to participate in world affairs, but I think having kind of a connection to something through the university is really amazing. And I think for many people who are part of this UCLA community, you know that you can participate in athletics even if you aren't an alumnus, or you can get your health care at UCLA even if you didn't have anything to do with UCLA. But otherwise, and the arts certainly are another way to connect to UCLA even if you didn't have any connection before. But I think on some of these other issues, having programs and centers and institutes on campus that have that kind of world view, and the distinguished faculty, the programming that is literally international, maybe even intergalactic, it's really exciting. And just being a citizen or a resident of Los Angeles, you have access through UCLA. So I think it's very exciting for me. As you can tell, I'm a cheerleader for UCLA, but I think that really excites me about the platform that the university provides everybody.
Thank you. I would say at the Fowler, we spend a lot of time doing outreach outside the museum. So we have a program called Fowler in the City. Not everything we do as Fowler happens on campus, because we're very mindful that there are some barriers, that a lot of the communities we're trying to reach live very far from Westwood. So there's a lot of investment in doing outreach and also making sure that we communicate clearly that we are aware that we're temporary custodians of this art and these belongings, and that these belongings matter here now only if they get activated through the work that is not just done by curators, but community is very important in what we do and how we interpret, create, and think of exhibitions. Going back to the Yoruba exhibition, we had 8 advisors. And the people who were there to create the exhibition with us really shaped what we did. But then there was this level of incredible excitement in seeing these works, sometimes objects of worship that are not necessarily considered art, but just displayed beautifully and interpreted very seriously, a sense of pride in seeing one's own story, identity, and cherished belongings being visible and celebrated. So museums have this strange effect. They can be very fraught and difficult institutions that push people back, but if we do our work right, we can be a real space of pride for everybody. And I think working in an academic institution such as UCLA with such a global outreach, and in a city like LA, there can be a real impact that really trickles down to the city. And we also do the educational programs too, because there's the Prop 28 disposition of California that really encourages art education. And we can provide those curriculums on world art better than most institutions in California. So we can also be an educational resource for teachers who may not have access to a lot of material on the arts of Cuba, Jainism, and many other things that we have great developed curriculums because we have done a lot of research and community work on these things.
Great, thank you. So Andrea, why would somebody in Los Angeles care about the black hole?
Oh, well, I'm going to go bigger. Well, they might care about the black hole. But astronomy and astrophysics actually plays a really important role, both to our local community and beyond. I mean, we live in a society that is increasingly dependent on science and technology. I mean, I think COVID taught us that lesson with the need for vaccines. and then the growth of AI. And yet, we live in a society that is incredibly science phobic and technology phobic. So I often call astronomy the gateway science. It's a field that people are inspired by early in their lifetimes and don't find too threatening. I mean, it's why I think roughly 20% of our undergrads take an astronomy class before they graduate. But I think that really goes as well for the general public. So you'll actually find a lot of people in our department engage in this public outreach. A recent example on campus was the Explore Your Universe event that had roughly 10,000 people visiting campus. And that's a program that actually came out of the Astronomy and Astrophysics department or division and then grew across the sciences. So that's my answer to why the local community should care.
Can I ask you to also say a few words about your work with encouraging girls to go into science?
Yeah, well, I mean, I say that mostly as the best way you can encourage, I think, a diverse audience is to be diverse yourself. And rather than speaking about diversity, just doing it and being really visible in sharing that work and your enthusiasm for that work with the general public. For that reason, I've really tried to engage a lot with documentary series. So while it takes away from your research in terms of time, it's really valuable in terms of encouraging the next generation. And for that reason, I actually devote all my teaching effort at the introductory courses, because just standing up there just changes the way students understand who can do it.
Thank you for your work. Yeah. Ruben, anything you want to add?
Of course. If you have no connection to UCLA, you should know that probably your children are actually studying, they're learning with teachers who are coming to UCLA to learn about Latin America and the Caribbean with some of the foremost experts across the disciplines. And that, I think, it's just a wonderful fundamental impact that the university is having on our local communities. You stole a little bit of my thunder when you mentioned the Oaxaca program, because not only are we bringing Latin America to Los Angeles and to UCLA, of course, but we are also now bringing teachers from LA to Latin America. So this past summer, we took 18 teachers to Oaxaca, Mexico, for a 4-week course on indigenous cultures and Zapotec language, thanks to a grant from the Department of Education. And we're thinking about replicating this program in Brazil, later in Guatemala. And this is actually very important because, as you mentioned, there are many students first of all, from Mexico, but also from the state of Oaxaca, a heavily indigenous state in Mexico, who live, work, and study in Los Angeles, in our public schools. And many of them are actually students now at UCLA. So this actually, what I'm about to say, actually connects with what Sylvia was saying. The importance of having, through the teachers, have these students learn about their cultures. Many of them are heritage speakers of Spanish, but also of indigenous languages. And I think that part of their socialization, of their learning experience, of their upbringing should include the fact that they can and should be proud of their cultures of origin, of their country of origin, of the richness of linguistic, cultural, social, the richness of their origins. And I think that the teachers themselves value that tremendously, because that's another way in which they actually can connect with these students.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing that, and a great example to show how our reach is much, much beyond the Westwood campus and into the community. So I'm going to ask you a final question before we open it up to the audience, and that is, if some of us here, are interested in making our work more global, do you have any suggestions or advice for them? Anyone?
Okay, I'll start again just to keep it going. Well, I think thinking about the community that we're in. You know, first of all, in embracing kind of Los Angeles, because as we've talked about many times, Los Angeles has such a diverse community. So immediately you'll be connected to a global community. I believe that, and I've seen it so many times. We see it in healthcare, we see it in the arts, we see it in sciences and beyond. So I think looking at what are our stakeholders in this community, not just as students and faculty and staff, but the residents around us. And really the footprint of UCLA now is expanding beyond, and just healthcare alone, you see we're in greater Los Angeles. So there's so many ways for us to think about our stakeholders, our neighbors, our friends, and any program. I mean, again, beyond the ones that we've mentioned here, I think we'll have the same group. So you can start by just taking a look around and saying, okay, well, who are my stakeholders and how can I expand? And there's, I mean, something really special about UCLA, as you can tell. I went to Berkeley undergrad, full disclosure, but graduate school all here and training here. But I remember at Berkeley, somebody told me, well, you're not going to have a Nobel Prize winner teach you an undergraduate course, so you can at UCLA.
I think that's been recorded, right? Excellent, excellent. Any other thoughts?
Well, I think one thing to think about, whatever you do, is that, I mean, the global dimension and the impact on the local, I think really pertains to whatever. It's, you know, things tend to be looked at in isolation only because we apply a narrow lens. But if we just allow to think a little broader, no matter what discipline has global connection. And it's just really about emphasizing and thinking through what brought us here to this place now. And there's so many trajectories that connect this city to the world and the work that we do as academics to the world, that it's almost disingenuous not to recognize it.
I have two thoughts on this question. One is around data. So thinking about these big telescopes, which are huge investments. The traditional old school way of thinking about data is you collect it, it's sort of one and done. You do your science, and it's, this data set is yours alone. But it turns out UCLA is the biggest UC user of these telescopes, which means we actually, in many programs, including my own, have large coherent data sets. So we could think about curating these data sets from an open access point of view, which I think is really important in terms of both building up our international connection, but also enabling or encouraging institutions that don't usually have a seat at the table in terms of doing forefront research. So looking at Roger, because that's an opportunity.
So the example that you gave really reminds us that sometimes being true to our core value, inclusiveness, right, and inclusive excellence, sometimes it means engaging in a very difficult situation and very difficult conversation. But also, what you said also reminds me that when we're talking about being global, doing global work, we also need to be locally grounded. And this local could be Los Angeles, but also could be other parts of the world, right? Ruben?
I think that we're all on board with increasing our local footprint and our local activities, but in order to do that, we need resources. And, I'm looking at our authorities here, of course. We need resources. We need, if we want to have more teachers, as in my example today, this afternoon, come and participate in these workshops, in these lectures, in these conferences, we actually need resources. We need to invest in our staff. And I think that you know very well that our staff is the life and blood of the International University, of the International Institute, but also of UCLA in general. And they are already doing a lot, and we're asking them to do even more. So we have to find ways to increase the pool of human resources so we can continue to expand our activities and extend those activities to more people in the community. We need to improve our systems to actually be more efficient as we bring people from, in my case, Latin America and the Caribbean for events and conferences. We're having a very hard time, paying them all sorts of things that many folks in the audience know very well, and you have heard me talk about this before in meetings of the International Institute. But I think that from the LAI point of view, certainly we need those resources. We need connections to local institutions that are being impacted by what we do, but may not be fully aware of what we're doing. We need connections to philanthropic networks in our city and beyond, so we can actually, just as we're doing today, talk and present and explain the kind of work that we're doing, why it matters, and the fundamental and profound impact that it's having in our community.
Well, Ruben, this is a very timely comment. Rumor has it that we have another campaign coming up. So yes, stay tuned for fundraising. So I think we have probably 5 minutes, maybe to 10 minutes for Q&A. So we have 2 mics here. Anybody who has a question to anyone on the panel, please raise your hand and we will pass the mic to you. Please tell me who you are when you ask a question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kevin Jabo. I work for the Congo Basin Institute, CBI. So we are mostly based in Africa, so we're very global. My question is on the name Glocal already exists on this campus. Are you aware of that? And did you do anything to make sure that as you're going Glocal, you're bringing the School of Public Health with the Glocal way? Because our faculty are doing a lot of work in different parts of the world, and it is heavily funded through the National Institute of Health. So we have the UC Glocal Health Initiative. Are you bringing that into this?
I believe that's a question for me. Or, interestingly, I was reminded by a colleague in geography, actually, that the word Glocal has existed in the geography literature for decades. So this is not new. But I think in the context of UCLA, given the fact that we have a new strategic plan, and Darnell should be talking about it actually, the expanding our reach as a global university and deepening our engagement with Los Angeles are 2 of the 5 pillars in the strategic plan. And so, this is a good time to invest in what UCLA is doing for Glocal. So by no means is this a new term, and obviously it is inclusive. It includes everything: public health, medicine, everything, law. Yeah. Any other questions? Craig?
Craig Ehrlich, past chair of the UCLA Foundation. I've spent half my life overseas, and I had the opportunity to work with Cindy and the Chancellor on all things global. I am so proud to see all of you talk about the success. But I have a worry. I think there's a narrative that we all need to consider, and that is much of our funding comes through the regents, the state legislature, and other people. And to the point you made earlier, Cindy, how do we convince people that the things that this global university does so well is worth being supported? And I'm not sure we do that messaging well. So as all of us go through our interests on a global basis, we have to think how we continue to convince others in the state legislature and other places why it is important we're the #1 global university.
Any panelists wanted to take that on?
No, I think that this is a very important point, doing that kind of public communication and advocacy to sort of explain, justify what we do and why we do it. And in my case, I think it's very important that we show, convince, talk about how Latin America, often seen as a source of trouble, of problems for the United States, is actually a source of great strength, connections, very important things that are coming from this region to the United States, and that we're basically sort of, joined at the hip, right? There's nothing separating us. And, a lot of the things that are happening in the United States and that will happen forward in terms of technological development, in terms of trade, in terms of political alliances, all sorts of things, right, will happen actually with Latin America, which offers all these different things that we are actually teaching, once again, right, to our teachers and to our students. Very important here is that in these areas that they feel and that they see that this neighboring region where many of them come from, many of their ancestors come from, is actually a great source of pride and strength for us here.
So Craig has been, a very consistent and strong supporter of UCLA, and has made this point about UCLA needing to communicate its value, its impact better, maybe to the lawmakers and so on and so forth. And so, this strategic plan, again, Darnell should be talking about it. part of the goal is precisely to tell UCLA stories, and that is, one of the major tactics of the plan. Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Any other final comments?
I'll just add, I really appreciate that comment. And I think there's a growing need to do this as education is increasingly under attack. So it's not only the need for UC to do this, but we need to do this as an educational system. And UC, I think, is in the best position to do that because we're, of course, a big public school, #1 public school.
Right.
Well, I wanted to thank Darnell, the Chancellor, for being here, and also the 4 panelists for this very interesting discussion. Congratulations on your work and sharing with us your global perspectives. We will continue this discussion and conversation in a reception in the main dining hall. So please join us, and please put your hands together to thank our panelists.